The morning sun slowly entered through the small window of her tiny apartment. Sarah opened her eyes with a tired sigh. She had worked late last night, but today was another working day. She looked at the clock. It was almost 6:30. She could not waste a single minute. Her little daughter, Emma, was still sleeping peacefully on the old couch. Sarah smiled softly. Emma's face was full of innocence, her tiny hands holding the corner of a faded blanket. For Sarah, Emma was the reason she kept fighting every single day. Sarah quietly stood up and went to the small kitchen. She quickly boiled some water, made tea for herself, and placed a slice of bread on the plate for Emma. The kitchen was too small, but Sarah was used to it. Life had never given her luxuries, but she always tried to give her daughter love and care. "Emma, sweetheart, wake up," Sarah said gently, brushing Emma's hair with her fingers. Emma slowly opened her eyes and smiled. "Good morning, Mama." Sarah kissed her forehead. "Good morning, baby. Eat quickly. I have to leave for work." Emma rubbed her eyes. "Mama, can I come with you today? Please, please." Sarah hesitated. Usually, she left Emma with a neighbor, but today that neighbor had gone out of town. Sarah had no other option. She thought for a moment. The office rules were strict. Bringing children was never allowed. But she could not leave Emma alone at home. She knelt down, looked into Emma's eyes, and whispered, "Okay, but you must stay close to me. No running around, no noise. Promise me." Emma quickly nodded. "Promise." She was excited. For her, going with Mama felt like a big adventure. Sarah dressed Emma in her simple but neat little dress, tied her hair in 2 small ponytails, and packed her a small lunchbox. Then she quickly changed into her own formal clothes, an old, plain suit that was carefully ironed. She looked in the mirror for a second, fixing her hair. Her face showed tiredness, but also determination. As they walked out, Sarah held Emma's tiny hand tightly. The morning air was fresh, but her mind was heavy. She kept thinking, what if the manager sees Emma? What if the CEO finds out? Will I lose my job? This job was everything. It paid their rent, their food, and Emma's school fees. Losing it was not an option. The bus ride was long and crowded. Sarah tried to keep Emma close, protecting her from the noise and pushing crowd. Emma looked around with wide, curious eyes. For her, the world was still full of wonder. She pointed at things outside the window, tall buildings, busy roads, children with school bags. Sarah smiled, but inside, she was worried. Finally, they reached the tall glass building where Sarah worked. It was huge, shining in the sunlight, a place that always made her feel small. Sarah took a deep breath. She bent down and whispered, "Remember, stay quiet. Just sit near my desk, okay?" Emma nodded seriously, as if she understood the importance. Inside the office, everything was busy. Phones rang, people typed on their computers, footsteps echoed on the floor. Some of Sarah's co-workers looked at Emma with surprise. A few smiled, but others whispered behind their hands. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She quickly walked to her desk, holding Emma's hand tighter. "Sit here, baby," Sarah said, placing a chair next to her own. She gave Emma her lunchbox and a small notebook with crayons. Emma happily started drawing, humming softly. For a while, Sarah focused on her work, typing emails, arranging files, answering phone calls. But her heart kept jumping every time Emma made a little sound. She prayed no one important would notice. But in the corner of her mind, she knew the risk. The CEO sometimes walked around without warning. He was known to be strict, serious, and never tolerated unprofessional behavior. Sarah swallowed hard. She tried to stay invisible, just like every other day. But today was not like every other day. As Emma leaned closer to her mother and whispered, "Mama, look, I drew a house for us," Sarah smiled and kissed her head. In that moment, she forgot her fears. She only saw her daughter's happiness. Little did she know, this very ordinary morning was about to turn into the most unforgettable day of her life. Someone was about to notice Emma, someone she never expected. And that moment would change everything. The office was alive with its usual energy, phones ringing, printers humming, footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Sarah kept her head low, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. She wanted no one to notice Emma sitting quietly beside her desk. But in an office full of sharp eyes, nothing stayed hidden for long. Emma's soft humming, the sound of her crayons scratching against paper, and her innocent laughter slowly caught attention. A few co-workers passing by slowed their steps. They looked down, surprised to see a little girl sitting on a chair. "Is that her daughter?" one whispered. "I think so," another replied quietly. "But kids aren't allowed here." Sarah heard the whispers, but she pretended not to. Her heart beat faster, and her palms grew sweaty. She had expected some stares, but hearing the words made her stomach twist with fear. Emma, however, was completely unaware. She was lost in her drawings. She showed her crayon picture to a kind receptionist who passed by. "Look, it's a butterfly," she said proudly. The receptionist smiled warmly, whispering, "That's beautiful." But not everyone was kind. Two colleagues from another department passed near Sarah's desk, their voices sharp with judgment. "This is unprofessional," one said. "Exactly. What if the CEO comes here? She could lose her job." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and forced her hands to keep typing. She wanted to defend herself, but she couldn't. The truth was, they were right. Rules were rules. She leaned toward Emma and whispered softly, "Sweetheart, please keep your voice low. Mama is working." Emma nodded obediently and began drawing silently again. Her innocence made Sarah's chest ache. She didn't deserve this life of struggle, this constant fear. But Sarah had no choice. Minutes turned into an hour. Sarah kept her focus on the computer, but she could feel the weight of people's eyes. Some were curious, some sympathetic, and some silently judging. The whispers spread through the office like wind carrying secrets. Then it happened. The sound of polished shoes echoed from the hallway, sharp, steady, and commanding. A hush fell over the room. Conversations died down, keyboards slowed, and heads turned. It was him. The CEO. Tall, confident, and cold as ever, Mr. Williams entered the floor. His reputation was almost larger than life. He was a man of power, known for his discipline, his perfection, and his zero tolerance for mistakes. Whenever he appeared, people straightened in their chairs, afraid of even blinking the wrong way. Sarah froze. Her heart felt like it had stopped. She quickly tried to shield Emma by moving slightly in front of her desk, but it was useless. The sound of his footsteps was already coming closer. The office was silent now, except for the echo of those shoes. People watched with both fear and curiosity. Some whispered under their breaths, "What will happen now?" Emma, unaware of the tension, suddenly lifted her head. Her wide innocent eyes looked straight at the tall figure approaching. She tilted her head curiously, then whispered softly, "Mama, who is he?" Sarah's lips parted, but no words came out. Mr. Williams stopped near her desk. His sharp eyes scanned the floor, then fell on the small figure sitting beside Sarah. For the first time, his expression changed. His cold face seemed to freeze, not with anger, but with something else. Something no one could explain. He stared at the little girl as if the world around him had vanished. Emma blinked, then smiled. "Hello," she said softly, her voice pure and innocent. The office collectively held its breath. Everyone expected anger, a strict order, maybe even Sarah being fired on the spot. But instead, Mr. Williams did not move. His eyes remained locked on Emma, and for a moment, he looked human. Sarah quickly stood up, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, sir. She had no one to stay with today, so I had to." But before she could finish, Emma interrupted with her childlike honesty. She pointed at Mr. Williams and said, "Mama, he looks like someone I've seen before." A wave of shock passed through the office. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Her face turned pale as whispers filled the silence again. Mr. Williams's expression darkened, but not with anger. His jaw tightened, and his eyes glimmered with something deeper, something buried in the past. For the first time in years, the unshakable CEO looked unsettled. And Sarah realized this was only the beginning of a storm she could not escape. The room was silent, heavy with tension. Everyone expected the worst. Whenever the CEO noticed even the smallest mistake, he was known to react with strict words, sometimes even warnings. A child in the office was not a small mistake, it was a violation of rules. Sarah's hands trembled as she stood beside her desk, trying to speak. "Sir, please forgive me. I didn't want to disturb the office. I had no choice today. It will not happen again." She lowered her eyes, already preparing herself for punishment. Maybe she would lose her job. Maybe this was the end of everything she had worked for. But then something strange happened. Instead of anger, Mr. Williams's face softened. His eyes, usually sharp and cold, remained fixed on Emma. The office workers exchanged confused glances. This was not the reaction they had expected. Emma blinked up at him innocently. "Mama, why is everyone so quiet?" she asked, tugging at Sarah's sleeve. Sarah gently placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, whispering, "Sure, sweetheart." But Mr. Williams spoke first. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "What's your name?" The office gasped silently. The CEO had never spoken to anyone like this, soft, curious, almost human. Emma smiled, not feeling the fear everyone else did. "My name is Emma. What's your name?" A faint, almost invisible smile touched the corner of his lips. "Mr. Williams," he answered quietly. Emma tilted her head, studying his face with childlike honesty. "You look like someone I've seen before," she said again, her voice filled with curiosity, not fear. Sarah's heart dropped. She wanted the ground to open and swallow her whole. She quickly whispered, "Emma, please stop," but her voice broke. The CEO's eyes flickered with something unreadable. For a moment, the mask he always wore seemed to crack. His gaze shifted from Emma to Sarah, and his voice lowered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She didn't understand. Tell him, what? Did he already suspect something? "I don't know what you mean, sir," she stammered, her voice trembling. But before anything more could be said, a loud cough came from one of the senior managers nearby. "Sir, should I call security?" he asked carefully, his eyes darting toward Emma. The question broke the moment like shattered glass. Mr. Williams's expression hardened again, but not with anger. He turned sharply. "No. That won't be necessary." His tone carried finality, leaving no room for argument. The manager quickly nodded and backed away, confused and nervous. The entire office buzzed with whispers again, their eyes flicking between the CEO, Sarah, and the little girl who had somehow softened the coldest man they knew. Sarah felt her knees weaken. She didn't know what was happening. Why wasn't he angry? Why was he looking at her child like that? And why did he ask such a question, as if he already knew something? Emma, still oblivious to the storm of emotions around her, lifted her drawing and showed it proudly to Mr. Williams. "Look. I drew a house. It has flowers and a big tree." For a moment, Mr. Williams did not speak. His eyes rested on the colorful drawing, then slowly on Emma's smiling face. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to take the paper, but he stopped himself. Instead, he nodded once, his voice deep but softer than anyone had ever heard. "It's beautiful." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. This man never praised anyone. He never even complimented his employees, no matter how hard they worked. But here he was, giving gentle words to her daughter. "Sir, I promise this won't happen again," Sarah whispered desperately, hoping to calm the situation. "Please don't take action. I need this job." Mr. Williams's eyes snapped back to hers. For a moment, Sarah felt as if he was looking straight into her soul. His voice was low, almost personal, when he said, "We will talk about this later." Her stomach dropped. Those words carried weight. They were not a threat, not exactly, but they promised something she could not yet understand. The CEO turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the silence he left behind. Only when he disappeared into his office did the room come alive again. People whispered louder now, eyes wide with shock. What just happened? He wasn't angry. Did you see the way he looked at the child? Sarah sat down slowly, her legs shaking. She held Emma close, trying to calm her own heart. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing, this was not the end. Something bigger was about to begin. And deep inside her chest, fear mixed with a question she didn't dare ask. What if Emma's innocent words were true? What if this powerful man really did have some hidden connection to her daughter? The ordinary rules of life had already changed. And Sarah knew nothing would be the same again. The rest of the day felt heavy for Sarah. Every second, she expected a call from the manager, maybe even from the CEO's office. But hours passed, and nothing happened. Emma sat quietly near her desk, drawing pictures and humming softly. From time to time, co-workers walked past, giving Sarah sympathetic looks. They were as confused as she was. The CEO had not been angry. Instead, he had reacted in a way no one had ever seen before. But Sarah knew silence was sometimes more dangerous than words. His promise, "We will talk about this later," echoed in her head like a storm waiting to break. By late afternoon, Sarah had almost convinced herself that maybe he had forgotten. Maybe his strange behavior was just a passing moment. Maybe, if she was lucky, tomorrow everything would go back to normal. But fate had other plans. At exactly 5 o'clock, when most employees were gathering their things to leave, Sarah heard her phone buzz. It was an internal message from the CEO's office. Only one line. "Bring the child. Come to my office. Now." Her heart dropped. Her hands trembled as she read the words again. She didn't want to go, but refusing wasn't an option. With a weak smile, she told Emma to gather her things. They walked down the long corridor toward the CEO's office. The hallway felt endless, every step heavier than the last. Emma skipped lightly beside her mother, holding her crayon drawings in her hand. She had no idea of the storm her mother was facing inside. At the end of the hall stood the large wooden door. Sarah raised her hand, knocked softly, and heard his deep voice from inside. "Come in." The office was massive, with tall glass windows overlooking the city. The late sunlight poured in, painting the room in golden shades. Behind the huge desk, Mr. Williams sat in silence, his eyes unreadable. Sarah stood nervously, holding Emma's hand. "Sir, I'm truly sorry. Please, I promise." But he raised his hand, stopping her. His eyes were not on Sarah. They were on Emma. "Come here," he said gently, his voice so different from the cold tone the office knew. Emma, without fear, walked closer. She held up one of her drawings. "Look, it's a tree with a swing. Do you like it?" Mr. Williams stared at the paper, then slowly reached out and took it. His fingers trembled slightly as he held the childish drawing, as though it was more valuable than gold. Sarah watched, confused and afraid. Why was he behaving like this? Finally, his eyes lifted to Sarah. His voice was low, filled with something she couldn't name. "How old is she?" Sarah hesitated. "She's 6. The air grew still. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, regret, and a memory buried deep inside. "She looks," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time, "so much like her." Sarah's heart pounded. "Like who?" she asked carefully. Mr. Williams leaned back in his chair, staring at the child who was now looking curiously around the office. His jaw tightened, and he took a deep breath. "Her mother, my past." Sarah frowned in confusion. "I don't understand." His eyes met hers, sharp and heavy. "You don't have to pretend. I know this child is not just random. There's a reason she looked at me and said I seemed familiar." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She shook her head quickly. "No, sir, please. You're mistaken. She's my daughter. That's all." But he leaned forward, his voice rising slightly. "Tell me the truth, Sarah. Who is her father?" Silence filled the room. Sarah felt her body go cold. Emma looked between them, sensing the tension. She tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, what's wrong?" Tears filled Sarah's eyes. She couldn't speak. She wanted to protect Emma, to hide the truth, but the weight of his piercing stare was too much. Mr. Williams clenched his fists, struggling to control himself. His voice lowered again, filled with pain. 6 years ago, there was someone. A woman I loved, but she disappeared without a word. She left me with nothing but questions. And now," he looked at Emma, his voice trembling. This child looks exactly like her. Sarah gasped softly. The truth was out now. He wasn't just reacting to Emma's innocence, he was connecting her to a part of his past he had never let go. She whispered shakily, "Sir, please, this is not the time." But he cut her off. "No, Sarah. The time is now. I need to know the truth. Is she mine?" The words crashed into Sarah like thunder. She froze, unable to answer, her tears falling silently. Emma, too young to understand, looked up at both of them with wide, innocent eyes. She held her drawing tightly, whispering, "Mama, why are you crying?" Sarah pulled her daughter close, hiding her face in her tiny shoulder. She wished she could escape, but there was no running away anymore. The past she had buried was finally standing in front of her. And the man who once had power over her heart was demanding answers she had promised herself she would never reveal. The office was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Sarah stood frozen, her arms wrapped tightly around Emma, who looked up in confusion. Mr. Williams's words hung in the air like a storm about to break. "Is she mine?" he asked again, his voice deeper this time, firm but trembling with an emotion no one had ever heard from him before. Sarah swallowed hard, her lips parting but no sound coming out. She had kept the truth buried for so many years, thinking it would never come back to haunt her. Yet here she was, cornered in the very place she feared most. "Sir, please don't ask me that," she whispered, her voice shaking. Mr. Williams's eyes burned into hers. He pushed back his chair and stood up, the power of his presence filling the room. He walked slowly toward her, his steps measured, his gaze never leaving Emma. "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I deserve to know. I should have known years ago." Sarah shook her head desperately. "No, I couldn't. I had no choice. You wouldn't have understood." His jaw tightened. "You think I wouldn't have understood? You think I wouldn't have taken responsibility?" His voice cracked slightly, his control slipping. "Do you know how many nights I asked myself why she left? Why she disappeared without saying goodbye? And now," he looked at Emma, his eyes glistening. "Now I see her face again. In this child." Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. She wanted to speak, but her throat felt locked. She glanced at Emma, who was holding her mother's hand tightly, sensing her pain. Emma's small voice broke the silence. "Mama, why is he angry? Did I do something wrong?" Sarah knelt down, hugging her daughter close. "No, baby, you did nothing wrong. Nothing at all." But Mr. Williams's face softened at Emma's words. The anger in his eyes dimmed, replaced with something heavier, regret, sorrow, longing. He lowered his voice. "I'm not angry at you, little one. Not at all." He knelt down slowly, his tall figure bending until he was at Emma's level. For the first time, his cold mask completely broke. He looked at her as if he had known her forever. "I just want to understand," he whispered. Emma tilted her head, innocent and curious. "Understand what?" His lips pressed together tightly. He couldn't bring himself to say it to the child. Instead, he turned his gaze back to Sarah. "You can't hide this anymore. She deserves the truth. And so do I." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She had promised herself she would never let this truth come out. She wanted to protect Emma from the complicated world of wealth, power, and painful memories. But now, standing in front of the man who once owned her heart, she couldn't keep the secret locked away. "I was scared," Sarah finally whispered, her voice breaking. "Scared of your world. Scared of your family. Scared that she would never be accepted. That she would grow up in a house full of cold rules, not love. I wanted her to have a simple life, away from all of this." Mr. Williams's hands curled into fists. His voice shook with disbelief. "So you thought hiding her from me was the answer? You thought keeping her away was protecting her?" Sarah nodded weakly, tears falling faster. "Yes. I thought it was the only way. I thought I was doing what was best for her." He closed his eyes for a moment, his chest rising and falling heavily. When he opened them again, they were wet with unshed tears. "You stole 6 years from me, Sarah. 6 years I will never get back." His voice cracked, raw with pain. Her first steps, her first words. I wasn't there. Because you decided for me. Sarah broke down, covering her face with her hands. Emma looked between them, confused and frightened by the emotions she couldn't understand. But then Mr. Williams reached forward gently, almost hesitantly, and touched Emma's small hand. I should have been there, he whispered softly. His voice carried a weight that made Sarah's chest ache even more. Emma blinked at him, her small fingers wrapping around his. Mama, why is he so sad? Sarah could not answer. She only cried harder. Mr. Williams looked at Sarah again, his voice steadier now but filled with finality. You can hate me if you want. You can judge me for the man I used to be. But don't take her away from me again. She's my blood. My daughter. The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. For the first time, Sarah felt the wall she had built for 6 years collapsing around her. Emma looked up at her mother, then at Mr. Williams. Her innocent voice broke the silence again. Mama, is he really my papa? Sarah's breath caught. She closed her eyes, knowing she could no longer escape. The truth had come to the surface, and now everything would change. The air inside the CEO's office felt heavy, almost suffocating. Emma's innocent question still echoed in the room. Mama, is he really my papa? Sarah froze. Her lips trembled, her heart racing faster than ever. She had hidden the truth for 6 long years, protecting her daughter from a world she feared would crush her. But now, the secret stood between them, demanding to be spoken. She slowly knelt down, meeting Emma's wide, curious eyes. Tears blurred her vision. Yes, sweetheart, she whispered, her voice breaking. He is your father. Emma blinked, her small mouth forming a surprised O. She turned to look at Mr. Williams, her little fingers still holding onto his hand. You're my papa. Mr. Williams's chest tightened. His throat felt dry, but he forced himself to answer, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard. Yes. I'm your papa. The words seemed to break something inside him. For years he had buried emotions under layers of discipline and coldness. But now, looking at the child who carried both his blood and his lost love smile, those walls crumbled. Tears glistened in his eyes, but he did not turn away. He reached forward carefully, as though afraid she might vanish, and pulled Emma into his arms. Emma giggled softly, her arms wrapping around his neck. I always wanted a papa, she whispered. The sound pierced Sarah's heart. She had raised Emma alone, given her love and care, but she could never give her this, a father's embrace. Sarah covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. For 6 years, she had carried the burden of silence, but in this moment, she realized Emma had been missing a piece of her heart all along. Mr. Williams held his daughter close, closing his eyes as if memorizing the feel of her tiny arms. His voice trembled when he finally spoke to Sarah. Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you let me know? Sarah wiped her tears, shaking her head. I was afraid, Daniel. Afraid of your world. Afraid your family would never accept her, never accept me. I thought keeping her away was safer. His eyes darkened with regret. You don't know how much it destroyed me when you disappeared. I thought I was the one who failed you. And all this time, he looked at Emma, his voice breaking. I was missing her. Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy with pain, love, and the weight of years lost. Emma pulled back slightly, her small hands touching his face. Papa, why are you crying? He gave a shaky smile. Because I'm happy, and sad. Happy I found you. Sad because I missed so much of your life. Emma tilted her head, then kissed his cheek the way she always kissed her mother when she cried. It's okay, Papa. You're here now. The words, so pure and forgiving, shattered the last of his defenses. He hugged her tighter, silently vowing never to let her go again. Sarah stood quietly, her heart torn between fear and relief. She had wanted to protect Emma, but now she saw the truth. Hiding the past hadn't protected her daughter, it had stolen something precious from both of them. Mr. Williams finally looked at Sarah, his voice steady but filled with emotion. From today, everything changes. I don't care about rules, about what people think, or about my family's judgments. She is mine. And I will not lose her again. Sarah's eyes widened. What do you mean? He stood tall, still holding Emma in his arms. His presence was powerful, but now it carried warmth instead of coldness. I mean she deserves both of us. She deserves a father who will love her and protect her. And you, he paused, his eyes softening. You deserve someone to share the burden you've carried alone. Sarah's tears fell again, but this time they were different. Not just of fear, but of relief. For the first time in years, she felt she was no longer alone. Emma yawned, resting her head on her father's shoulder as if she had known him forever. Her little voice mumbled sleepily, "Can we go home now? All of us?" The simple question struck both adults like lightning. It wasn't just a child's wish, it was the start of something new. Mr. Williams looked at Sarah, his voice firm but tender. "Yes. From today, we go home together. No more secrets. No more running." Sarah nodded slowly, her heart finally letting go of the fear that had controlled her life. She walked closer, placing her hand gently over Emma's back, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in hope. The three of them stood together, the city lights glowing beyond the glass windows. The world outside remained the same, cold, demanding, ruthless. But inside this office, something had changed forever. A father had found his daughter. A child had found her missing piece. And a mother had found the courage to face love again. The past was painful, but the future had just begun. And from that day forward, nothing would ever be the same.